Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk with Brent O'Brien and Tim Rowe from The Straight. Brought to you by our sponsors, Inglis and Darley, for the first time. Yep, we've got new sponsors on board. Thanks to Inglis and Darley for their support, and looking forward to them being partners with the podcast. Today, we have a feature interview with a global bloodstock figure, Johnny McKeever, chatting about Dom Sutton's rapid rise as a trainer, as well as the possibility of Too Darn Hot returning to Australia. We also review a better than expected Inglis Melbourne Premier Sale and look to the stud battle for Rivellino. In the racing game, it's a big week for Rose Hill with the New South Wales government to conduct a review into the Thoroughbred Racing Act. And where to now for Ciaron Maher Racing after the departure of CEO Ben Salinger. And in wagering, Betfair raises its commission while Sportsbet follows a softening Australian market. Tim, let's get stuck into it. It was a good few days at Inglis Melbourne Premier, probably better than we expected. How do you reflect on it?
Well, as you say, Brent, I think, there can be a bit of pessimism in this game. Understandably, the market has cooled off a bit, but it all comes down to expectations. And I think Premier, by and large, exceeded most vendors and certainly buyers' expectations of what they were predicting going in. So, as we keep saying, the industry is quite resilient. And if you've got, there's some very nice horses there for the market, and sort of it was a diverse buying bench. And so I think that played into Premier's hands. There was something for everyone where, yes, every sale's got that, but to a degree, in that sweet spot of sort of probably $100,000 to $300,000 horses and 400, big portion of the market got involved or could get involved.
Yeah, I think, it's you mentioned in your article, I'll call it your article, which will be published, which will be available now live on The Straight. You talked about, I guess, the probably unexpected buying bench and the new blood and I guess new people coming in to invest, which probably we haven't seen over the last 12 months. So certainly positive sort of sentiment there. And as I said, if people have success, they go through that. I mean, what surprised you more, Tim? Was it the clearance rate, which probably have been struggling all year, but was able to get sort of well above 80%? I know early on in the sale was sort of in that 60% zone, but it really picked up towards the end of the sale and Inglis were able to get plenty of business done. Or was it the fact that the average also improved on last year? And what we've seen throughout this year is probably, averages have been maintained on the fact that clearance rates have dropped off. So what was the probably surprising aspect to you?
You mentioned, but I think also the size that the market gravitated towards, as we've touched on previously, the market is looking for those next stallions, and Schnitzel and Written Tycoon and I'm Invincible in particular. Those Chen and Zoostar have sort of driven the market the last 3 or 4 years. And even longer, where people have gone, what, safety in the champion size are proven, and first season size are popular, always good for syndicators and trainers trying to then on-sell them. But in this case, Earthlight, the Daily Shuttler, Gayath sold well, a Camelot sold 420,000 to Eddie Hirsch of owns all the United Petroleum Service stations. That's the most, from what I can understand or see, is the most expensive yearling he's ever bought. He's a billionaire, but he doesn't like to give away his money he likes to try and find a diamond in the rough, but he even stepped up, again, which points to that diversity in the buying bench.
Yeah. And one of the busiest international buyers at Oakland was the Group 1 winning team of behind Ferrucci, the Australian Guineas winner, Simon Chappell, Dom Sutton's dad, Nick, and a man we know quite well, Tim, Johnny McKeever. And we had a great chat with Johnny. We'll play that out in a minute. But yeah, I think it's, if you're trying to work out how a trainer goes from not having a starter to getting a Group 1 winner within less than 12 months, you probably don't have to look very further than Johnny McKeever's influence.
He's, as you say, we've spent a lot of time with Johnny. He's good fun to be around, but he's also absolutely astute bloodstock agent all over the world. He's got his finger on the pulse everywhere. And as he says, in this interview, you need a touch of luck, but you can't beat that experience and the eye that he's got. And Byron Rogers was helping him as well at the Premier Sale. Ferrucci from New Zealand ready to runs, but have really acquired some nice horses this year so far. So sky's the limit for Dom Sutton.
Yep, and here was our chat with Johnny McKeever. We covered a whole range of issues.
Johnny, welcome to Straight Talk. Big weekend for yourself and Ferrucci winning the Australian Guineas. For Dom Sutton and the connections, Simon Chappell, and obviously Dom's father, Nick, a family you've been close to for a long time.
Yeah, Nick and I were childhood friends. So, as you can probably hear from my voice, which is rather hoarse, we've been celebrating a little bit since Saturday. But it was, something that doesn't really often happen in one's career as a bloodstock agent, that one of your great friends says, our son's starting off training in Australia. And I've been on that journey with Dom a little bit. I was actually involved with him. He used to come around spotting at the sales with me when he was working for Troy Colston's. And, I'm so close to the family, and particularly Dom, I got to know. And then suddenly Nick goes, he's actually starting out, and the first thing we need to do is get to some horses port. And it was straight after the Melbourne Cup. So we got on a plane and flew from Melbourne to Auckland and went off, ran round in a car with Andrew Buick, and we inspected all the major drafts in New Zealand for that sale, drew up a list, and then I had to fly back to Goss. And Dom and Raquel, his partner, who's been so integral in the whole training operation that they've set up together, looked at all the horses on the list, and then they went bidding. And I think there was something like 20 horses on the list, and on the first 17, they got outbid on everything. And I thought, oh dear, this doesn't work. And then they suddenly bought number 18 on the list, and there you go, it was a super set, and it was actually consigned by a great friend of mine, Ian Kemp, Kilgraven, and it was actually homebred of another great friend of mine called Sir Peter Vella. And I sort of basically didn't really twig on that at the time, but as it's turned out, sort of a great breeding friend's horse has come through a great consigning friend's horse. It's been sold to my great friend's son, who's just starting up as a trainer in Australia. Bing bang bong, blink, and we go to last Saturday, and suddenly he becomes his first Group 1 winner, and he's a Group 1 winner.
And he was 150,000, I think, at the 82-year-old sale in New Zealand. So in the scheme of things, you weren't. What it told about is just turned out to be great.
We knew we went there, and Nick had been very kind and said, look, around about 200,000 average, we can afford to get involved in 2 or 3. And that's what happened. And he, luckily, by the gods, were looking down on us. And, all due respect to any bloodstock agent, that you get lucky sometimes, because you bid on lots of horses and you don't get them. And sometimes the one you get is the real one, but you could have bought the one before and then you wouldn't have been allowed to buy the one afterwards. So it's always, I'm fully aware that all these things are a huge amount of luck. But the other part of the equation is the horses then have to get trained. And some trainers do a great job with horses, and most trainers do a great job with horses, but some people have just got that little extra special instinct. And I could honestly say this, even though you'd say, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? But I do think Dom Sutton has got something a little bit extra about him. His attention to detail is just unbelievable. His drive, his instinct. I haven't really come across this in any client that I've ever worked for before. I've worked for a lot of maybe more established people. They're already set in their ways, but Tom has just come across to me as someone with a very good head, very cool, calm and collected, and he knows where he wants to go, and he wants to go to the top, I think. And I know he does. He wants to go to the top, and I kind of fully believe that he's going to get it.
And it's when you start buying for a new trainer, just coming through, he hasn't even started his career yet. I mean, did he have an idea of the preference of types of horses he wants? I mean, you've got a Guineas horse in this case that, probably maybe suited his skill set. I mean, how did you work through that? How did you work out the type of horse that might suit him?
That's it. I'm not going to bullshit. Of course we didn't know that. We went off to New Zealand that time with his dad and him, and we just wanted to buy some horses that would be effective and, win races to start a new trainer off. Which certainly would be a complete myth to say we saw him there and we knew that we had to buy him and he would win a Guineas. No, of course, gods have got a smile on you a little in this case. Yeah. So he's been given the goods. He's found out the ability the horse had. He was devastated when it didn't win the Caulfield Guineas. And everyone was ringing up and saying, how amazing, mate. And he was really unhappy. And I was like, hey, your first season as a trainer, you've just been beating a whisker in a Group 1 at Caulfield. He was like, I find it really hard to take, and everyone's been nice to me and saying, well done, and it's not well done, I didn't win. So there was a little bit of massive satisfaction, I think, that he proved his own judgment correct on Saturday. And yeah, his judgment is pretty good, I think.
It sounds like with Dom, obviously, he's made the most of what he's got and some very nice horses in the stable, but he probably will. He's got David Moody supporting him now, and I imagine some syndicators are going to gravitate towards him, understandably. He's a young guy, popular, and can clearly train to manage the growth of that stables. He got the attitude and aptitude, I'm sure, to enter.
I rarely met a guy as cool, calm and collected as him. He doesn't seem to let the pressure get to him too much. He's hugely ambitious, but very modest. And he knows that you've got to work bloody hard to get there you go. And yeah, I have fully believed that, he's got what it takes to expand the stable. He's actually told me he doesn't want to expand it to crazy levels. I don't know. I'm sure a lot of leading trainers have gone through that. And then when they get offered more and more horses, maybe they take more and more horses. I don't personally think there is a big benefit in being a really top trainer without having huge numbers. But those will be decisions for him and his business team and his dad, and they're not my decisions. I'm just come in as a guide to help spot young talent, and I'm really pleased to be doing it for someone like him, because I think whatever mistakes I make, he'll make the best of them,
Did your buying instructions change from Friday to Sunday after they won the Guineas, or was it always the case?
Not really, no, it's because that's how professional Dom is. We'd just done our due diligence. He'd seen a lot of on-farm inspections and came and did as many as he could in between training. And I came in and I did my usual thing and did 4 days, and I looked at the most important lots that I felt like all the most applicable lots. I obviously didn't see all 800, but I probably saw about 600. And we've made our lists, and sort of then his clients are obviously very excited and very buoyed by the win. So they come in and they've spent a good bit of money there. I'm just looking here. I think they spent over $1 million now on 4 horses. So let's hope they get some more rewards.
And the interesting one on day 2, Johnny, you bought a Mermis Colt. I think it was about 380,000. By a stallion that was actually 420. Oh, there. Let's check it. Let's 40.
Yeah, well, in fairness to Byron Rogers, who's also been a big part of Simon Chappell's success, Byron's system has always been applied to most horses we bought. And Byron was wildly keen on this Mermis horse. I didn't need to be told by Byron this was a nice horse, because I saw it straight away. And I know Mermis from up north, and I know what phenomenal sprinting stallion he is. And I can even say at 420, I think this horse would have made a lot more money in the ring at Tattersalls, so where people know Mermis. I think he was actually good value for what he brought, even though it's a big figure for a stallion that the Australian public is not well cognizant with. But I don't think it was a crazy price at all. I think he's very much a Tyrrell. I'll eat my hat if he's not was it called the Marinagot Long Plate?
You're over on plate, yeah.
That would be the type of race I could see him going for, yeah. I've won it before with a horse called Finance Tycoon. Yeah, I'd like to see him go for that. Yeah.
I mean, a bit about, I guess, European sides having success in Australia with their 2-year-olds and younger horses. 2 Darn Hot, obviously, full of horse very close to your heart. I mean, how do you reflect on his success so far in Australia? And I guess the big question is, what are the prospects of him coming back again next year?
I'll reflect on the former first. He actually did better in Australia than he did in England, because I think the mares that were sent to him were more precocious and stronger, and he probably shined as a Tyrrell sire in his first season of runners better than he shined in England until the autumn when the good horses started coming through. So I think the Colonial mares have been a help for 2 Darn Hot, and they certainly, but what's been interesting is, okay, well, they've been good 2-year-olds, will they train on? Will they be good 3-year-olds? And I think, the answer is definitely, and that's what this should be do. If you look at his pedigree, Darshan Maher, you fully expect these horses are going to be better 3-year-olds than they're going to be 2-year-olds. He's been really successful up north, but his success down here has been very noticeable, and the Australians are wildly keen to get him back. That is a decision for his owners, who are Lord Lloyd Webber and Darley Stud, and I'm not authorised to say anything one way or the other. I would love him to come back, and if they send him back, I'll be thrilled. And so will lots of people I know around here be thrilled. But if they don't, I'll respect it. It's their decision. They've got a very valuable stallion on their hands. So they have to look after his welfare first and foremost. And I think there's a good chance he might come back. Everyone in Australia wants him to come back. If it happens, because I love the Australian industry, I'll be thrilled for the Australian industry.
Yeah, you're almost an Australian citizen, Johnny, for the amount of time you spend down here. And you have been to, I think, at least 4 yearling sales so far this year across Australasia. Got a good handle on the market. What have you made of this year's sales?
Yeah, I was sort of came down and all my friends here told me there'll be a market correction this year. And there's been a bit of a market correction. But when I go to the sales and do my due diligence and try and look for the best yearlings I can find and then go bidding on them, I do a little bit of work for Eon Camp, as we've referred to earlier, looking for ready-to-runs and those trade horses. They've been as expensive as ever, if not more expensive, I think. I think Hong Kong has been very strong market this year. And it's the usual thing. For the really nice horses, they sell extremely well. There's no problem. But there is definitely a bit of correction going on in the middle and lower end of the markets. And I guess that's just a reflection of the economy in the world at the moment. So I don't see any vendors whinging too badly about it. And I think they feel that they may get a little bit less with some of their lesser horses, but they may have been paid a little bit more than they would have expected some of their better horses. It balances out, I'd say the market's very healthy here.
Cheers, thanks for joining us, Johnny, and all the best for the rest of the sales season.
All right.
All right, it's time for our daily stat of the week, and this one's all about Bivouac, who was absolutely flying at stud. Did you know the last stallion saw 2 group winners this early in their Australasian career? It was none other than his own champion sire, Exceed and Excel. That's some serious company to be in. Like father, like son, Bivouac is proving he's the real deal. Right, welcome back to Straight Talk, brought to you by Inglis and Darley. Tim, well, round off the breeding talk, we can chat about Rivellino, who is sort of put himself right in the middle of the Golden Slipper calculations, but he's also put himself right in the middle of the stallion calculations. You had a chat to Peter O'Brien, who's right in the heart of those discussions at the moment. I mean, what's your expectation? Where will he end up at, Tim?
Well, as Johnny just touched on, there's debate about will Too Darn Hot come back. Well, he may not. And, everyone's looking for the next son of Too Darn Hot. And Rivellino's unbeaten at the moment. So, therefore, is untapped. We don't quite know exactly how good he is. He's in the slipper markets. People are telling me that maybe the size is actually the ultimate aim, but he's going to be right there. And studs, given the price, if he did go and happen to win the slipper, he's probably worth, even in this market, 30 million, 20 to 30, 40 million. So studs are looking to try and buy in early. There'll be significant kickers, and that, at least 5 studs have already shown significant interest. And I'd expect, as Peter told me, they're waiting to get Premier out of the way and probably even the Todman Stakes this weekend to see where they line up. But I'd expect at least some sort of sale or deal before the slipper, de-risk for the owners that took the chance as a yearling, and then also, some upside for the stud that buys in perhaps at a slight discount. And so if they happen to win a slipper or a size and possibly champagne, well, then there'll be significant kickers involved.
Yes, and that Inglis Millennium form certainly is standing up at the moment, Tim. All right, now off to the racing news now, and the Rose Hill inquiry is back in the spotlight. The New South Wales government to release their response to the Select Committee report today. We don't have it as yet, but we'll have plenty of coverage on the Straight on that. But we've already learned what to expect, I guess, with Racing Minister David Harris revealing this week that the Thoroughbred Racing Act will be reviewed. That comes after questions were raised in parliamentary estimates in New South Wales Parliament about a property deal which saw Racing New South Wales secure a house in Bathurst from now chair of Racing New South Wales. She was then deputy chair for $1. There's a bit to play out in this story, Tim. There's also a bit to play out in the broader sense. Going to be a big month for Rose Hill. I think the briefing to members around about what the whole sort of commercial nature of the deal and what the opportunity might be will be put out, if it's not already, certainly in the next few days. And then April 3 is the deadline there for that Rose Hill vote. Look, interesting times. There's obviously been a petition as well to unseat the ATC chairman, Peter McGorran. That's failed due to a few technical issues and some administrative issues. So at this stage, Peter McGorran will be the man standing up and pressing the case at that special general meeting on April 3 on Rose Hill. This issue is continue to roll on, and we'll continue to have coverage here on the straight, but keep an eye out for what the government response might be to that Rosehill Select Committee inquiry, which of course we covered extensively last year. Moving on, Tim, the Ciaron Maher Racing. You had the story first over the weekend. Talk us through Ben Salinger's departure from one of the country's biggest stables.
Those that maybe read it, the original story, I spoke to Ben a couple of weeks ago, and we spoke about it on this previous episode of Straight Talk. There's lots of changes going on. Ciaron Maher is obviously racing. He's obviously the biggest racing stable in the country. They've made a few people redundant, and it seems, Ben has decided to walk suddenly. So he texted me later on and said he was happy to, his time had come, and was happy to leave. So obviously there's a bit going on in the background there. They've got ambitions to be sort of 50-50 split New South Wales, Victoria, whether they can get stables at Randwick, how that all looks, Ballarat, what that plays in their sort of overall stable picture. As I said, costs are rising on every business, so it's understandable that they make changes, especially such a large business. Nothing stays the same, but it was certainly a sudden departure. And Sam Kavanagh, son of Brett Kavanagh, many people would know, trains in Scone, he's taken over as interim CEO, and I guess he's only a young guy, but I guess that possibly suits Ciaron, as those that have followed Ciaron's rise to the top. He's happy to back young people that he sees talent in, but they're young, they mightn't have the experience, but he's happy to back them in with sort of David Eustace, Annabelle Neesham, and there'll be a host of Jack Turnbull at the moment as the assistant trainer, host of young other people we probably don't know in the background as well that have helped him get, as said, establish the largest stable and the most winningest stable this season.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? The corporate structure, and probably the first company as a company structure as a training operation in Australia, and it all I think it's absolutely been a really key part of their success in terms of being able to scale and obviously incorporate different aspects of the business. It did seem a little bit of an interesting fit. You've got Ciaron Maher, who's probably everything that a corporate person isn't. He's very upfront. He's a country boy from Winslow. He's not the sort of person you expect sort of the top end of a major company, the way that he does things. But obviously he's an elite trainer. In order to scale and build that business, they've had to have that structure around it. What will be interesting, Tim, is to see how that structure goes going forward. So I think there's a bit to play out still there. Certainly the interest we've had in that story has been astronomical, Tim. I would say it's probably been one of our top 2 or 3 stories we've ever had on the straight. People do want to know about this stable. They're fascinated with how it's developing and how it's growing. So I think it's a story which we'll probably tick on a little bit more, and we'll continue to cover it. Right, new this week, Tim. Betfair will be raising their MBRs there, which is effectively a commission. They're raising it by 1%. And what that means on Australian racing is 7% to 8% on that. I think non-Australian racing's from 5 to 6%, sports from 5 to 6%, and New South Wales and ACT racing, as well as NRL, stays at that 10% level. It was an interesting discussion, or we had an article up on the straight earlier this week about what it means and the rising costs. And I guess Betfair's challenge, Tim, is that they've got this, they have to state their commission, they have to state their MBR in order to make sure that, obviously they're charging that to customers as part of their transaction. We've seen over round, which is, I guess, the percentages that bookies put their markets to, increase more and more over the last 5 or 6 years, certainly the last 2 or 3 years. We're in a situation now where the punters are probably the one who are sort of, having to sort of wear the additional costs of what's going on in the broader industry with greater taxation, point of consumption tax, as I mentioned. Compliance as well has become a major issue, Tim, as a whole. Where does this end, Tim? Where does this take us?
In what is a low margin business, anyway, the wagering, WSP and corporate bookmaking, Betfair's lowest of low. No one wants to see prices go up, but you can sort of understand it, why they've done that to stay in the game. And I guess Betfair is important to the ecosystem. You follow, late in the last 3 or 4 minutes of betting in a race, prices will firm, and it all just follow Betfair. It all follows Betfair. There's not much trade, I guess, opinion involved into that market directly from the corporates. So if Betfair drifts, that horse drifts with the corporates. So widely important at the moment to drive turnover. Anecdotally, interestingly, whether, I think Racing Victoria did a deal with Betfair trying to bring down.
That didn't work.
It didn't work, didn't drive to it. But Betfair isn't for everyone. I've tried to master it and got not even close, but it still fascinates me. I still get on there probably too often, but still trying to, master or even having an account for 20 plus years. So I think it's vital to the industry that Betfair survives and keeps going, just how they become a more important or have a bigger role in the wagering ecosystem. I don't know how they get there, particularly with sort of the importance of Australia versus international for Betfair. I think they've got their own challenges, in the Northern Hemisphere as well. So, yeah, interesting times.
It is interesting times. And Betfair as a company structured differently, of course. It's actually effectively sort of franchised under a different license here in Australia and then given ownership than it is internationally, but then they obviously take the license to operate Betfair. And in the article earlier in the week, if you have a look through, Kim, there's some data there around about the falling holds on major races where, and if you look at Flemington last weekend compared to what it was sort of 3 or 4 years ago, the numbers have dropped significantly, well over 50%. Liquidity in that market is everything, and they are losing liquidity, and you've got to think putting up their commission rates is probably not going to help that. But from Betfair's perspective, they had to do it to recover their costs. So look, I think it's a broader challenge and probably something that bared out a little bit in around the wagering industry around Sportsbet's results. Well, Flutter's results. So Flutter is Sportsbet's parent company, of course, and that they released their annual results this week, which covers the 2024 because they're a Northern Hemisphere company. Their financial year sort of flows through to the calendar year. Yeah, it indicated that a softer racing market in Australia has continued to take its toll. Sportsbet suffered a 3.5% fall in revenue during 2024, and they blamed increases on taxes and that softer sort of market. As part of that, Sportsbet revenue fell from $1.45 billion to $1.4 billion last year. That's their second consecutive fall. Now, they were talking about someone that sort of, I guess, has about 45% of the Australian market, Tim. So what's going on in Sportsbet is what's going on elsewhere, And what was interesting, and so it does mirror what's going on elsewhere, our active monthly players, which is a metric that's used, which is basically the amount of people that are active on a monthly basis, actually rose significantly, 5.4% on average. So the number of people playing is definitely increasing, but for a variety of reasons, the ability to make money out of those people has been diminished. And this goes back to what we were talking about before, Tim, about these margins and the fact that these bookies are now having to work out, how do I make more out of punter A, B, and C in order to make our bottom line look better? Because it's, that the time of sort of, turnover continuing to build and all those sorts of stuff has disappeared. Yeah, and there's some challenges here for these major wagering companies because if they're going to sustain their size.
You need their generosities or their marketing budgets getting directed more towards sport because it's more profitable for punters, from a bookmaker's perspective, for punters to be betting more there than on racings. Again, another challenge for the racing industry. There is a crossover, and I'm sure it's a good marketing tool. People will start betting on sport and then hopefully become captivated by racing and the puzzle that is gambling on horse racing.
Definitely right. I think racing's challenge is that a lot of the funding models built a few years ago when deals were done around about turnover, and it makes it difficult now to turnovers being sort of pushed down a little bit, and they're trying to work out other ways to make money. It could leave racing in a difficult spot in terms of funding, and I think that's a big issue, and it's a lesson to everybody that when you're doing these long-term wagering deals, and New South Wales is about to go through a significant review of that at the moment, that you have to account for changing tides and changing dynamics. As I said, there's a lot going on in the wagering landscape at the moment in Australia. We've got the Bet Blue Bet sort of play at the moment. If that comes off, which may not, but that will change the market again. We've got Entain in this uncertain situation. We've got Tabcorp under Gil McLaughlin sort of moving to a few different ways. There's so much going on, and we've got Sportsbet who are probably just have certainly plateaued, if not dropped off a little bit in terms of their market share. So it's a lot going on, and well, best of luck to those that are trying to plot what it's looks like going forward. Okay, thanks for joining us on Straight Talk, brought to you, as I mentioned before, by our new sponsors, Inglis and Darley. Thank you so much for your support. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you're listening to our podcast, and be sure to subscribe. Yep, and we're looking forward to catching up next week, Tim, and we'll talk through a whole range of issues. There's so much going on at the moment. We've got sales season. I think we didn't even mention that the Magic Millions Cuter sale is on the March sale has been pushed back 2 weeks by Selkai and Alfred. So that'll change things about a little bit in the sales season. There's plenty of else going on at the moment. There's great racing, Group 1 racing, week on week. There's a question over the future of the All-Star Mile. There's so much we actually didn't cover, but we hope we were able to cover all the issues that matter here. We'll be back again next week, and we'll see you then.